So we're not live. I'm just making a recording so I can upload it to YouTube later on. So. Hey. Oh, we had a big group this morning. I think there were 16. No, it was a big group.
That's good.
We had some fun. We had some fun. We're going to have fun this time too. Huh, Rob?
Yes.
Some fun now. You better say that. Especially since I'm wearing my polka dot glasses. Okay, hey, how are you doing?
Good.
Good to see you. Come on in.
I didn't want to be on the mic or anything.
Oh, no.
Right.
Isn't that beautiful?
Thank you. I was going to tell you, I really liked the audio mix today.
Oh, did you?
I did because I'm an alto,
Oh, yeah.
and I could hear the alto
Oh,
part
there you
today.
go.
So that was really great.
Carmen and Joan were singing out there.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Good.
Don't believe we would get
Okay, so Genesis, we're in Exodus chapter 5, and in Exodus chapter 5, we're going to begin with, we're working on Moses. We've been talking about Moses. Remember that he has already seen the burning bush, and we're trying to deal with our fact that we think what we've seen Charlton Heston perform is a little different than what we see in Scripture. Which we know that, but isn't it funny how that kind of gets ground into our mind, that that's the way it was. But how old was Moses when he went out when he left Egypt? 40. And how old was he when he saw the burning bush? 80. And was 80 considered old in that time? Yes, it was. So remember, Joseph only lived 110 years. The ages are getting down. Every once in a while, we'll have people now that they'll know lived 130 years or something like that, but that's not like the normal thing. More and more, the number of years people lived has gone down. So Moses is old when he takes on this task. I don't know how many of you have been 80 yet, but imagine when you're 80, accepting the job of going and taking a whole people group out of slavery that have been in slavery for 400 years. Can you imagine that, starting a work like that? At that time, pretty crazy. So we're going to take a look at Moses and Aaron. Remember, Moses was sent. Moses was told that Aaron would help him, and they've been sent to go talk to the people. So if we look in chapter 4 at the end, verse 29, Moses and Aaron brought together all the elders of the Israelites, and Aaron told them everything the Lord had said to Moses. He also performed the signs before the people, and they believed. And when they heard that the Lord was concerned about them and had seen their misery, they bowed down and worshiped. So it's kind of like a revival, like a renewing of their faith. So here's my question for you. Here's my question. They've been in slavery 400 years. Do they even know God? Moses was only a child when he was taken from his Hebrew home and raised as an Egyptian, although he still had contact with his mother and older sister and apparently his older brother, but he was a Hebrew for 40 years. He was raised as an Egyptian. Does he even know God? Does he know who God is? Does he know the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Do they know those? Well, let me tell you, there's a wide variety of opinions, and you're welcome to have your own. But I'm going to tell you where my opinion is. So there's a wide variety of people, scholars who believe that Moses had no clue anything about his Hebrew heritage. You know, that he had no idea anything about God or what had happened with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that was lost. And that the Hebrew people, because they had been in slavery all that time, they had lost all that too. I don't agree. I think that they passed down what we have. Genesis, when we read through Genesis, remember how we saw the pattern of the literature. It was made to be read. So, do you think that at some point we were sitting in caves, sucking our thumb and making scribbles on the wall? I don't. I think we were created in the beginning of Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were intelligent people that knew how to do stuff. Whether they wrote things down or not, I don't know. I think that some of the historical evidence we see of people writing on caves are things like I did when I went camping. We'd write on caves, we'd draw pictures, and we'd do stuff. Kids would do stuff, whatever. And I think we see some of those artifacts and those evidences that way. But personally, I don't believe we started as little worms and then we turned into frogs and then we became this and that and over thousands of years. I think God created Adam and Eve as Adam and Eve, and they were intelligent people and they made decisions and they knew how to do some stuff.
Amen.
Now, I don't believe that they necessarily had writing or script at the time, but I think that quickly would develop, because how'd you leave a note for Eve to make sure she remembers to bring the apples home when she gets, whatever. Yeah, I think it's just naturally you would do that. You would create ways, symbols of ways. We have very early writing samples, cuneiform tablets and things that go way back in time. So they very quickly became written language. But I'm not even worried about that, because we have the oral tradition. In Genesis, all of Genesis, remember how we looked at the pattern of the literature and how it was made to be oral? The first 11 chapters had its own pattern, and then there were 3 sections, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Those stories were in that pattern: A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime, E prime, F prime, and then it went back G2 and went backwards again in the same pattern, telling the story. And that's how they would remember these as oral stories. And what would they do with these stories? This was what the children learned. This is what the Hebrew children learned. They learned to tell those stories. Okay, Joey, it's your turn. Get up there and give us the story of Abraham. And Joey would begin to tell the story of Abraham. And if Joey didn't get it right, who was there to correct it? Remember, I took him out of my last class. I didn't bring this time. Remember, we did the generations? And when Adam was alive, Methuselah was alive. 7 generations were alive. So if Joey didn't get it right, there's a bunch of people who lived through it. And they would be there to say, that's not quite the way that it went. And they would be there to correct it. Now, have the Hebrews been sticking with that? Probably not like they did. Probably not like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in that day, right? Probably not to that level. But for 400 years, they've been telling the stories. So I don't believe they had this great, big, strong faith and they were just worshiping God and doing all the right things. But I do think they knew the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that they hoped for and wished for the promises that were included there. Because remember, there were several places where it quotes what God said. You're going to be my people, and you're going to be popular. You're going to have this land, and you're going to populate it. Now, are they anywhere near that land? They're in Egypt. Is that the land they're supposed to be in? No. But part of the prophecy also said that they would be in slavery for 400 years. And of course, you can't ignore that. That's a part of that story back there in Genesis. They would be in slavery for 400 years. That was part of the prophecy. I would like you to take a look very quickly at Genesis. I think it's Genesis 12, I think it is, 12:1. Genesis 12:1. Verse 2. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Now, if I were a Hebrew, 400 years in slavery in Egypt, I'd say, well, that was a bunch of baloney. Who is being blessed because of us? If I was a Hebrew, even one of Abraham's family, I would be saying, this is weird. How are we and all the earth going to be blessed? It probably just means that everybody will be better because we're here to make it a better place. Do we understand it that way? When we read it, what do we see? We're on the other side of Christ. So when we read it, we go, that's Christ. This line is going to end up coming to the Christ, the Messiah, and we're all going to be blessed. All the nations will be blessed because of the openness of Christ, that everyone can approach God through Christ. We see that. They didn't see that. I wonder how many promises we read in Scripture today that we will not understand until later. bet there's some little pieces of things where we go, oh, that's really kind of interesting, kind of odd, but is that really where we are today? It may not be, because some things are for the future. And once the future happens, we can look back and say, look, there's one passage that says that his people will be in slavery for 400 years. They end up being in slavery 440 years in Egypt. So we see these things, and they don't always know what they mean when they hear them, and they may make assumptions about it. So right now, the Hebrew people are in slavery where they're at. So just so you know, in my opinion is that they knew these stories, but they were child stories. They were what you did when you learned your children education. It wasn't necessarily what you believed or necessarily understood. And you've got 400 years of living as a slave in Egypt, in this little community in Goshen, which is not even the land of your fathers. You know, it's an odd land, but God is growing that population. He's growing them up. They came as 73, and they will leave at 2 million after 400 years. And what did they learn while they were in slavery? We'll see what they learned. Let's go to Exodus then, chapter 5, verse 1. Afterward, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me in the desert." Oh, that's a nice idea. You know what? You might not get much favor if you said, "We want to take them out and out of slavery, and we're going to run away." Okay. Right? We're going to go out for a festival. Now, they had lots of gods in Egypt, over 80, and you could have as many gods as you wanted. And the big gods, the powerful ones, they had big buildings and lots of priests that followed after them. So those were the big names, you know. So you could have your own little god. Like God himself describes it. You can burn your food on some wood of the fire, take a little piece of that wood, carve it up, and balance it on your little desktop there, and there you've got yourself a god. That's the way God describes it. But basically, that's what they would do. They would pick out any gods, and they might have their household god. They might have a little widget that they carry with them. We talked about that practice even among the peoples that were surrounded with Abraham and them. So this was a common practice, and Egypt had lots of gods, and you knew how important a god was by how big their temple was and how many priests served them. So if you had a great big fancy temple and you had 60 priests, ooh, you were, top of the line. That was a powerful god. And so in Egypt, this question that the Pharaoh is asking is a critical question. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, "Let my people go so they may hold a festival in the desert." Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord?" Notice those are all caps. In other words, who is this Yahweh that you're talking about? "That I should obey him and let Israel go. I do not know the Lord, Yahweh, and I will not let Israel go." I don't know this Yahweh guy, and I'm not letting them go. Then they said, "The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Now let us take a 3-day journey into the desert to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God, or he may strike us with plagues or with the sword." So is that exactly what God told him to say? He's just trying to get them out of there, right? Let's go out and have a festival out in the desert. We'll go out and have a good time. Now, why would...
said they were coming back.
Details. To get an even more clear understanding of what Moses is trying to do here, look what he says in Exodus chapter 8, verse 26. He kind of clarifies this later on, what he's thinking. "But Moses said, 'That would not be right. The sacrifice we offer the Lord our God would be detestable to the Egyptians. And if we offer sacrifices that are detestable in their eyes, will they not stone us? We must take a 3-day journey into the desert to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God as he commands us.'" Okay, now we got all kinds of problems here. First of all, where is the law that says they have to offer any sacrifice? Well, I could see where whatever they're going to offer might be detestable to the Egyptians. Egyptians might have been worshiping a calf. And if they if they sacrifice a calf or a bull, I could see where Egyptians would find that offensive, right? Whatever it is they're practicing. But where is the practice that says that Hebrews sacrifice to God at all, and what they sacrifice and how that happens? Where's that? We don't have that yet. We don't have the law yet.
So we have examples of Abraham giving his son and having they had all those stories.
Where is the instruction on who's supposed to sacrifice what? Abraham went to go sacrifice his son. Oh my, this is all getting really weird. So get your Bibles ready. We're going to look at some scripture. Look at chapter 3 of Genesis.
It starts with the brothers.
Genesis chapter 3 starts even before that.
Cain and Abel, right?
Look at chapter 3.
What verse?
We're going to look at Adam and Eve. What were they told was right or wrong? Were they told to eat from the tree of the garden? They were told not to eat from the tree of the garden. And the serpent came and said, oh, did he really say that you should not eat of the tree? So the rule was not to eat of that tree. Okay, so I hope you all are obeying that rule, because whatever that tree is, you're not supposed to be eating from that tree. I'm not sure if it's apples or pears, but whatever it is, don't eat of that tree. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? So how did at this time with Adam and Eve, how did they know what was right and wrong?
God told them.
God would tell them, right? Okay. Verse chapter 4, Debbie, what is chapter 4 about?
Cain and Abel.
Why are they offering sacrifices? Who told them to offer sacrifice? Wait, I didn't see anything in here in chapter 3 or 2 or 1.
Someone told them.
They just made it up, decided to go make sacrifices?
No, God set the example when He made skins for them to wear after the fall. That was a sacrifice.
Okay, so then there's a ruling here that says, so then from now on you will offer sacrifice?
It wasn't a law, but there was an example.
We don't have a law yet. We don't have any law. We don't have a list of rules. It's not quantified here. Why would that be? Why wouldn't those rules be a part of here? Because this Genesis and Exodus are not about Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel or Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob or Moses. None of this is about any of them. Who is this about?
Jesus.
God and Jesus. This is about God. This is about who God is. So now we go back and they haven't even told us. We didn't even know with Cain and Abel they were supposed to be offering any sacrifice. Maybe they just did it for the fun of it. The punishment was because of the attitude, right? Not about that one sacrifice was better than another, but it was about the attitude of the sacrifice that was being given. We see that lesson here.
You kind of infer that God told them, but it's not explicitly written.
Yeah. Look at, there's lots of examples here, all in Genesis. Look at Genesis chapter 12. Finally, in Genesis 12, we get God speaking directly to Abraham, telling him about what he has in mind. And God says in chapter 12, Genesis 12, verses 2, start verse 2, I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. There's God spelling out what he has in mind. Take a look at Genesis chapter 13, verses 14 to 17. The Lord said to Abraham, after Lot had parted from him, lift up your eyes from where you are, look north and south, east and west. All the land that you see will be given to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring would be counted. Now, when the Hebrews are saying this, saying this story, they're reading this promise. 73 of them, slavery in Egypt, are reading this promise and going, what? We're not even in that land. We're not that many people. This seems weird, right? This has not been fulfilled even as these people are in Egypt. Until the end, then we start seeing it be fulfilled. So when the message came, when Aaron and Moses come back, the Hebrews are linking what they're saying to this message, that they're going to go to a land where they have grown now, they're a large people now, and they're going to go to a place where it'll be their place. So there's like this, all of a sudden, like the promises are starting to come to life. They're starting to see, wow, that's right, if we go out of Egypt, look how many people we are now. That's been true, that's been fulfilled. And God did tell us he was going to give us this other land. Maybe we should go back to that land. Can you see it? Like their excitement, how they would be interested and intrigued by that they're seeing God's, much like we are now. What's intriguing us right now? Do you see God's hand? We have the prophecies of the second coming of Christ and of the end of earth time, and we see all these things starting to fall into place. Beginning, the big one being when Israel became a nation. From that time, and now we're seeing the different political alliances. We're seeing the 10 countries, the League of 10 countries. We've seen so many things start to come into play. It's actually getting scary. That's the way the Hebrews felt when Moses and Aaron began to remind them of the promises, remind them of what God was going to do, and saying, this is it. We're coming to that time. Big barrier. Just like us, for the second coming of Christ, we see things we can't imagine are going to happen. Well, how could that possibly happen?
Right.
Because we're on this side of the events, right? The Hebrews have no idea about the 10 plagues that are going to come, and that Pharaoh will actually let them go, and they'll go with a bunch of gold and silver, and that they'll survive in the desert for all those years. And when they go into to build their temple, their tabernacle, they're going to have all this gold to make the stuff for the tabernacle. They have no idea all of that. All of this is coming ahead. But we can look back, because we're out in the future, we can look back and see how it happened. And us as them, we are like they were as slaves in Egypt. We've been waiting for this second coming time to come. And now we're starting to see the signs. And many of us are getting very excited by the signs that we're seeing. Some are fearful about the signs that they're seeing, right? We feel like the people here felt when they start hearing Aaron and Moses say their words. Look at chapter 14. Debbie, do you remember the story of Melchizedek in chapter 14 of Genesis, 18 to 20? Okay, Melchizedek is a priest. Priest from where? Salem, the city of Salem, which is Jerusalem. So what's he a priest of? Like we said, who was Jethro in Midian? Who was he a priest of? Was he a priest of Yahweh? Because there was this Melchizedek that was a priest of Yahweh. Where's the priesthood? Who are the priests? We don't know anything about that yet, or what's been instituted in that way. Take a look at in Genesis chapter 15. And all of that chapter, God speaks his covenant to Abraham. He says, don't be afraid. I am your shield, your very great reward. Abraham believed the Lord, and the Lord credited to him as righteousness. You see in that whole chapter, he lays out the covenant. And in chapter 17, Genesis 17, 1 through 22, he lays out circumcision as a sign of the covenant. Now, was there circumcision in that day? I showed you a statue from Egypt, from before the Hebrews got to Egypt, and the statue, we looked at the guy's willy, and he did not have a tip on that. That was cut. So circumcision was an ancient practice that happened in many cultures. God didn't command it or say it had to happen until chapter 17, when he institutes circumcision as a sign of their willingness to be in covenant. Isn't that kind of interesting? And then last week, if you remember, we talked about how Moses' wife, Zipporah, little bird, well, don't give little bird a knife, because she took after Moses' boys and made sure they were circumcised, and he had not taken care of it, and God was going to kill Moses. Why was God going to kill Moses? He's using Moses to bring the children out, because God can use somebody else. God can use somebody else. He used Moses. Moses wasn't all that, even by Moses' own words, he wasn't all that, right? And God could use someone else. And God was going to kill him because he had not been compliant with the covenant. that he knew. He must have known, because God doesn't kill people because they don't know stuff. He must have known, and he didn't take care of that. So Zipporah took care of it, and he was good to go then, to keep being on. In my earlier class today, someone brought up Judas. Many people that believe that Judas betrayed Christ, that he really didn't have a choice but to betray Christ, because it was Christ's plan that Judas betrayed him. My opinion is that if Judas, just like with Moses, if Judas had not been the one, it would have been a different one, and it would still have fulfilled all the prophecy. That's what God does. Just like Moses, if Moses had not done that circumcision, God was going to kill him. That would have been it. And we would have been talking about Joe Schmo, I don't know, somebody else. Someone else that God had prepared and would have do the work. In my opinion, Judas wanted to bring Christ in front of the Sanhedrin so that they would see him as Christ. And that's why he killed himself when it worked out. If he had wanted to do it for the 40 pieces of silver, then why wasn't he happy when he got the 40 pieces of silver? He didn't do it for the 40 pieces of silver. There was a large group of believers in that day that thought if they could just get Jesus to talk directly with the Sanhedrin, that he would convince them and they would see that he was the Messiah. There were people that wanted him to get into that position. So my opinion is that was Judas's choice. And I think Jesus gave Judas a chance at the Last Supper just before he went out. He said, looked him in the eye, and he had his chance. So anyway, just my opinion. Who is all this about? It's about God and what God wants. So God is making sure to give us the lessons about what he wants. In Genesis chapter 17, this is about the fact that God wanted the circumcision to be a sign of the covenant. In chapter 18, we have Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed. How did they know that was wrong? Where are the rules that say that it's not okay to have sex with anything and anyone you want to? How did they know that? We don't have a list of that until later on. In chapter 21, we have this weird thing where God shows Hagar where the water is, and she gives Ishmael water, and they're able to survive out in the desert. Ishmael becomes the father of all 12 of the Arab nations. The Arab nations, the ones that end up being the big enemies of the 12 children of Israel. Why would God do that? Because God has his plan, and he's working his plan from the beginning. He's making this plan so that they understand what they're coming from. And now God's going to bring them to what he has next for them. So this is a part of his knowing what's going to happen and making sure that it happens. In chapter 21, we have Isaac being offered as a sacrifice. Now, what's that about? We ever heard of such a thing, that Isaac would be offered as a sacrifice? Of course, God stops that. But the point being, why did he even go sacrifice anyway? I don't see any rules they have to sacrifice anything. We need to remember that the law has not been given yet. The law is going to be given later. And when the law is given, the Hebrews are going to be glad to have it. Why? For all these reasons. Because it clarified everything. It made everything real clear. You do this, you do that. This is what I want done. This is how I want it done. They welcomed that because they had lived so long with these kind of like, well, so-and-so told me, and here's the song we sing, but the song doesn't really say anything about that, right? Not everything is in the song or the spoken thing that they did. We can see here that some of these things were in between the lines. We don't know. God is telling this story. He is allowing this story to be told for us. In my opinion, Moses did know these things. Aaron would have known it better because he had been with the Hebrew people all that time. But I believe Moses did know it. I believe that was a part of why God had him raised by his Hebrew mother. And when he was 40, he was still curious about it. That's why he was going out to watch the slaves work. So he's very knowledgeable. I think he also knows all 80 of the Egyptian gods and what they do. And I think he probably thought of the Hebrew God as being just like one of them. Except now, this Hebrew God has spoken to him. And of course, it was in this great big temple, and there's all these priests around. No, God speaks to Moses in a burning bush. Wah, 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 right? But he does give him signs and miracles. And Moses is feeling very insecure about what he's doing. So when we come here in Exodus to chapter 5, and Moses is trying to negotiate with the Pharaoh regarding the children of Israel. So let's go back in chapter 5. Let's go back to verse 4. But the king of Egypt said, Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their labor? Go back to your work. Then Pharaoh said, look, the people of the land are now numerous, and you are stopping them from working. So all the Pharaoh cares about is the work that's not going to be done if they go out for their 3-day festival. That same day, Pharaoh gave this order to the slave drivers and foremen in charge of the people. Now, the slave drivers are the ones that have the whip and they're the ones that do that stuff. But the foremen were actually Hebrews, other Hebrews that were put in charge. So you'd have the Hebrews in charge of the other Hebrews, and then you had the slave drivers. And the message was, you are no longer to supply the people with straw for making bricks. Let them go and gather their own straw, but require them to make the same number of bricks as before. Don't reduce the quota. They're lazy. That's why they're crying out, let us go and sacrifice to our God. Make the work harder for the men so that they keep working and pay no attention to lies. So, and one of the things that people misunderstand is they did not have to make bricks without straw. You can't. The straw is what holds the brick together as it dries. Otherwise, it would just crumble. So you can't make the bricks without the straw. What the punishment here is, they have to go get the straw and prepare it too. Before, the straw was being brought to them prepared, and they would mix it with the mud and they would do the work of making the bricks. So now they have to go find the straw as well as make the bricks. It's doubling their workload and still keeping them with the same quota. Then the slave drivers and the foremen went out and said to the people, this is what Pharaoh says, I will not give you any more straw. Go and get your own straw wherever you can find it, but your work will not be reduced at all. So the people scattered all over Egypt to gather stubble to use for straw. The slave drivers kept pressing them, saying, complete the work required of you for each day, just as when you had straw. The Israelite foremen, appointed by Pharaoh's slave drivers, were beaten and were asked, why didn't you meet your quota of bricks yesterday or today or before? Then the Israelite foreman went and appealed to Pharaoh. Why have you treated your servants this way? Your servants are given no straw, yet we are told, make bricks. Your servants are being beaten, but the fault is with your own people. Pharaoh said, lazy, that's what you are, lazy. That is why you keep saying, let us go and sacrifice to the Lord. Now get to work. You will not be given any straw, yet you must produce your full quota of bricks. The Israelite foremen realized they were in trouble when they were told, you are not to reduce the number of bricks required of you for each day. When they left Pharaoh, they found Moses and Aaron waiting to meet them. And they said, may the Lord look upon you and judge you. You have made us a stench to Pharaoh and his officials and have put a sword in their hands to kill us. Moses returned to the Lord and said, O Lord, why have you brought trouble upon this people? Is this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought trouble upon this people, and you have not rescued your people at all. Poor Moses. I feel bad for him. Then the Lord said to Moses, now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand, he will let them go. Because of my mighty hand, he will drive them out of this country. Now pay close attention to these words here. God also said to Moses, I am Yahweh. See the capital letters there? I am Yahweh. I appeared to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob as God Almighty. What's God doing? He's reminding them of all their stories, all their knowledge that they have of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the promises that were made. But my name is Yahweh. I did not make myself known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, where they lived as aliens. Moreover, I have heard the groaning of the Israelites whom the Egyptians are enslaving, and I have remembered my covenant. You think you forgot it? No, remembered it meaning I am fulfilling this covenant. Therefore, say to the Israelites, I am Yahweh, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Yahweh your God, who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians, and I will bring you to the land I swore with uplifted hand to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you as a possession. I am Yahweh. God is making this dramatic presentation to bring them back to their roots, back to the promises that they know from old. And he's saying, I am the one. I am the one who's going to do this. It's not Moses, and it's not Aaron, and it's not Pharaoh that's going to bring them out of Egypt. He is, God, Yahweh, is going to bring them out. And he gives his name because he's calling it out. He's standing up and he's calling it out. This is the time, this is the moment, it's going to happen now. And I'm going to do it. Moses reported this to the Israelites. Now Moses, come on. How did he do it? Did he say it with pizzazz? I don't know. He says he's kind of mealy-mouthed. Moses reported this to the Israelites, but they did not listen to him because of their discouragement and cruel bondage. Then the Lord said to Moses, go tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the Israelites go out of his country. But Moses said to the Lord, if the Israelites will not listen to me, why would the Pharaoh listen to me, since I speak with faltering lips? I just can't say it right, God. Even the Israelites won't listen to me. What makes you think the Pharaoh's going to listen to me? Now the Lord, Yahweh, spoke to Moses and Aaron about the Israelites and Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he commanded them to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. And then we have this long section of telling the names of the families. Do you mind if I don't read all that? There's a bunch of names. There's a couple of them that lived extraordinarily old, 137, 133 years. That was extraordinarily old. So then we get down to verse 26. It was the same Aaron and Moses to whom the Lord said, bring the Israelites out of Egypt by their divisions. They were the ones who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, about bringing the Israelites out of Egypt. It was the same Moses and Aaron. So they're trying to make that connection that this is who is doing this and how it connects to the different families. Verse 28. Now when the Lord spoke to Moses in Egypt, he said to him, I am the Lord. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, everything I tell you. But Moses said to the Lord, since I speak with faltering lips, why would Pharaoh listen to me? Chapter 7. Then the Lord said to Moses, see, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be your prophet. In other words, what he's saying is that Pharaoh, Moses is going to be God's way of speaking to Pharaoh. And Aaron will be like a prophet. He could be the voice. So it's going to be like Aaron speaking and Moses speaking to represent God to Pharaoh. You are to say everything I command you, and your brother Aaron is to tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go out of his country. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart. And though I multiply my miraculous signs and wonders in Egypt, he will not listen to you. Okay, now, so is that fair? Remember, this whole book is about God. Does God make people do bad things? No. Evil things? So when I was a girl growing up in Parker, Arizona, we had a boat. We had one in Yuma too, but in Parker, when we moved to Parker, we would take the boat to just above the dam and launch. And we were in our early 20s, late teens, the four sisters. And we would launch just above the dam and then drive the boat up to Lake Havasu to under the bridge. And we could dock the boat there, and go have lunch and goof around in Havasu. And then we would come back down the river and come home. So the only problem was my dad had taught us everything about the boat, and we had been out many times with him, so we knew what to do. But he made us tie this knot. I don't know the name of the knot, but I remember saying, Dad, do we have to tie this knot? Because it's really hard. And can I just tie like my knot I do for campfire girls, right over left or right? No, you got to do this knot. So that knot was the knot we would always tie when we would dock at Havasu. He made us promise to tie that knot. We would go then do our thing in Havasu. When we would come back, we could not get that knot untied. It was so hard. it was like, like cement had made it was so snug and so tight. We'd carry a screwdriver with us because we'd have to get the screwdriver out and wedge it in between and try to loosen it a little bit at a time until we could get it out. Don, do you know the name of that kind of knot?
No, I don't.
I don't know either. He had a name for us, but he told me that was a special knot, and we had to promise every time. And here's why. Because the kind of knot it was that as the boat moved with the water and against the dock, as the boat moved like this, that knot would get tighter, not loose. Apparently, my Campfire Girl knot would loosen with the motion of the boat. But whatever that knot was that we had to tie, it would tighten and get tighter and tighter as the boat moved against the dock. So did the boat tighten the knot? Did the dock tighten the knot? What made the knot tight? The motion of what's happening. That's what God is saying. God is not going to make Pharaoh obstinate, but God's actions are going to cause the hardening of Pharaoh. He's going to get harder and harder. And God is telling Moses this before it happens, so that when Moses gets in and Pharaoh says, "Nah, I don't believe you," and they're going to be doing 10, they're going to be doing all these different signs, and every time Pharaoh's going to get harder and harder, not easier. He's not going to soften. And God is telling Moses that ahead of time. Does that help? Would that help you? Mm-hmm. To know that even though we're going to do this, I'm going to go through these actions and do this, it's not like I'm going to get discouraged when Pharaoh does not give in. Because I know God's told me before it started that his heart was going to be hardened by these activities. This is going to get harder and harder. He's like that knot. And by the way, the word used for the hardening is the word used for the people of that day when they would do shipping and stuff. It is that very term that they would use for how the knot hardens as the boat pulls against the dock. So just so you know. Chapter 7, verse 3. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and though I multiply my miraculous signs and wonders in Egypt, he will not listen to you. Then I will lay my hand on Egypt, and with mighty acts of judgment I will bring out my divisions, my people the Israelites. And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord, that I'm Yahweh. I want to emphasize that that's saying Yahweh. He's naming himself. I am Yahweh, not just some other God. He's going to prove that he is Yahweh. And I think it's important to notice how God is making that point. I am Yahweh. He's giving his name. When I stretch out my hands against Egypt and bring the Israelites out of it. Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord, as Yahweh commanded them. Moses was 80 years old and Aaron 83 when they spoke to Pharaoh. So today in our culture, do we have a hardening that's happening? Did we know that the hardening would happen? When we read Revelation, it talks about the end times and different things that are going to happen. Is everyone going to come to a saving knowledge of Christ? No. No, everyone is not. So we have to think about what our attitude is going to be about our ministry and our work and our service. As we do what God has asked us to do, we're going to see hardening. What else are we going to see? We're going to see people come to a saving knowledge of Christ. We're going to see people coming to a saving knowledge of Christ and being able to rapture with him and away from the end time things that are going to happen. Now, is there one more chance? Yes, there is. Revelations tells us that once we're raptured, there will be a chance. It'll be hard, and they'll probably die a martyr's death in that time, but there's still a chance. Because when all those Bible prophecies are fulfilled, there are going to be people who knew their scripture when they were young, when they came to church, when they went to VBS. They're going to remember the things of God and the things that we said in the scripture. And when we're raptured, I believe that's going to be a great opportunity. I think that there will be people who go, look what happened. Look at who was raptured. They're going to recognize the pattern. And there may be those that maybe will respond, because there is another opportunity to respond. It's a hard time to respond, But at least there's still a chance.
I think that's gonna be a really hard time for another reason too, because, you know, the powers of the world are going to see that happening, and they're not gonna wanna admit that that was God at work, so they're gonna come up with all these other reasons for why that happened, and make it,
You even let you.
I know,
Make
but
it
I
really
know
difficult.
my son, my oldest son, who has a saving knowledge of Christ when he was young. And people believe once saved, always saved. If so, thank God for that. But I don't know where he's at now. I can't say with confidence that he has faith. So when this rapture happens, he'll know it. He'll recognize it. And that may be the tipping point for those people who have stayed on the edge, and they know more than they, just like with the Hebrews, when Moses comes and starts reminding them of the promises of the covenant, that God is going to bring you out, and they start getting a glimmer of hope for it. So that's my hope. That's my last, it's a terrible hope because that's such a terrible time after the rapture.
but it's gonna be hard because it's gonna cast a lot of doubt. There're gonna be people that have
Other
heard of
people.
that, yeah, and that don't know what to believe, or that,
Right.
you know, they've
I know.
heard it, but they're not sure, and so they make the wrong choice, as well as those who do, you know.
I just keep
embrace.
praying.
But
But
And I pray for once saved, always saved. I like that idea too. So the reason for the plagues then, we're coming to the plagues. God gives 3 reasons for the plagues. Eve, would you be ready to read Exodus 7:3? Debbie, would you be ready to read Exodus 10, verses 1-2? And Judy, would you be ready to read Exodus 12:12? And let's start with Debbie. Would you read 10, 1-2?
Then the Lord said to Moses, Go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his officials, so that I may perform these miraculous signs of mine among them, that you may tell your children and grandchildren how I dealt harshly with the Egyptians and how I performed my signs among them, and that you may know that I am the Lord.
So who is it that God wants to reach with these signs? The Israelites themselves. He wants them to be able to tell their children. He wants them to know. So that's one group. Thank you. And then 12, Judy, what do you have there?
For I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, and will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord.
So he is going to show all the worshipers of God, these other gods, anyone that's turned to these other gods, he's going to show that he is God and that they are nothing. So that's another point he's going to make. And then back to 7:3, Eve.
Oh, I'm sorry, 7:3?
Uh-huh.
We're in Exodus, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
yes.
yeah. 7:3. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart and multiply my signs and wonders in the land of Egypt.
Keep going. He will not listen.
Pharaoh will not listen to you, but I will put my hands into Egypt and bring the military divisions of my people, the Israelites, out of the land of Egypt by great acts of judgment.
That's good. So he's going to show the Egyptians. He's going to show the Egyptians. He's going to show the Israelites. He's going to make a point that he is God, truly God, God with a capital G, Yahweh, and that they are nothing but little icons. These are little icons that have been created by man themselves. So that's the reason that God is going to bring these different plagues that come along. So let's see how receptive Pharaoh is to the signs, right? In verse 8, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when Pharaoh says to you, perform a miracle, then say to Aaron, take your staff and throw it down before Pharaoh, and it will become a snake. So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and did just as the Lord commanded. Aaron threw his staff down in front of Pharaoh and his officials, and it became a snake. Pharaoh then summoned wise men and sorcerers, and the Egyptian magicians also did the same things by their secret arts. Each one threw down his staff, and it became a snake. But Aaron's staff swallowed up their staffs. Yet Pharaoh's heart became hard, and he would not listen to them, just as the Lord had said. There's the sign. He gave them the sign. Now he's going to begin giving the judgments. And there will be 10, and each of the 10 is focused directly on major Egyptian gods and belief systems. And so as we go through the 10, we'll be looking at all the different things that the Egyptians were worshiping and that had as gods, because God challenges every single one of them. Make sure he's got them all taken care of. So, and of course, Pharaoh's heart continues to harden through this. So, anybody else have any good for the go for the cause? So we'll
That's
start.
kind of like, what we, he's like telling them then that he's gonna harden Pharaoh's heart, so there are gonna be some hard things to go through. And